throttled, but my audio is getting throttled as well. So very quickly, back in 2020, I wrote this article about how China is controlling the port. They're managing the port of Haifa, Israel. All right. It's only natural, SPIG or SIPG, which is the technology company that is managing the port in Haifa, Israel. It's only natural that they want to expand. You should see the map now, and you should still be able to hear me. You should see the map now. They themselves have come out and said we want to um, we want to expand. All right. You also have Israel now trading in rubles thanks to an agreement that they have with the UAE, um, that has purchased that port. Okay, they've purchased that port. So you have a port in Israel that's sitting right on the Mediterranean Sea. China wants to expand their operations and their technology all across the Mediterranean Sea. This port right here called Haifa, Israel, is owned by India, and they've both India and China have an interest in expanding their operations and their ports all the way down to Gaza, especially northern Gaza, because it's still part of the Israel interests, correct? The business interests. All right. So they need to evacuate 1 million people out of North Gaza, put them into South Gaza, which is closer to Egypt. Egypt, who is basically sitting aside and saying, let's see how this international trade on the Mediterranean Sea, where China is now operating their technology companies out of these ports very efficiently in the on the Mediterranean. Let's see how that works and see if eventually we want to be a part of the deal. So the people in Gaza are basically being shuffled around so that these deals can go through. Meanwhile, on September 11th, you have Joe Biden responding to these business deals by saying, hey, look, I'm excited about this ambitious project in the Middle East. Oh, goody. We're going to do a big project where um, we're going to have all sorts of access to trade um, with Israel and Europe and um, West Indian ports and Persian Gulf ports. I mean, he's just all over the place, right? And meanwhile, China is already doing it. They're already managing a port that is owned by India, but it's located in Israel. So this article comes as a response to the the efforts to counter China's growing influence in the region, in the Middle Eastern region. So I went through all this before, but I guess you guys didn't hear me, so I'm doing it again. So so that's what's really going on. You need to move these people out of North Gaza and get them into South Gaza so that there can be room for the expansion of these ambitious transport projects, whether they happen with the United States brokering the deal or whether they happen with China. But either way, it sounds like the United States may be either be working with China or they're going to try to undermine China in their efforts to expand in the Middle East. I'll leave that up to you guys. You guys can decide. Personally, I think when it comes to business, countries are going to work together. Um, and I guess when I started talking about the Abraham Accords, is when everything kind of fell apart in this audio broadcast and people couldn't hear me. But just very quickly, I won't share the Wikipedia page. Trump tried to broker a deal between Arab countries and Israel countries, basically shoring up the business partnerships and the business arrangements, and this was done in a direct um, response to, the growing Chinese influence in the Middle East. In fact, it says right here, the Abraham Accords are bilateral agreements on Arab-Israel normalization signed between Israel and the UAE and Bahrain on September 15th of 2020. Mediated by the United States, actually mediated by Trump, the initial announcement on August 13th, 2020 concerned only Israel and the UAE before the announcement of a follow-up agreement between Israel and Bahrain on September 11th, 2020. So 3 years later, you've got the new president, Joe Biden, coming out and talking about basically the same thing, trying to elbow China out of these business deals, right? But you cannot forget about the fact that India and the United Arab Emirates together made a side deal, making it so that India could trade in rupees, undermining the dollar, which meant that they could purchase that Chinese operated port located in Haifa, Israel. Any questions? I feel like this is really where the whole thing goes. Let's see. Let me see if I can find something else that might, that we can sort of add into this. So back in earlier this year, let me see if I can share this article. Back earlier this year, let's see, China brokered. Here it is. So everyone's trying to broker deals. All right, Biden is trying to broker a deal so that this, big Middle Eastern project, which involves Europe, can take place. But back earlier this year, China was trying to broker a deal between Saudi and Iran, and it looks like that deal. I'm not sure, but I feel like that deal is a success um, because the United States, in response to this, tried to broker a deal between Saudi Arabia and Israel. And it was just announced a few days ago that Saudi Arabia has backed out of that deal. But it looks like they're staying in their deal with Iran, which was brokered by China. So, in this proverbial game changer, is this the proverbial game changer or an inflection point? Or is it just another temporary twist in the Byzantine Middle East labyrinth? It's far too early to tell. Um, so this website is the fpforeignpolicy.com. So they're pretty cynical about this deal, but of course they would be because it's probably backed by some sort of American interest. And so anything that's not involved with the United States, they're going to be cynical about, right? But if that's the case and it's so weak sauce, then why did Saudi Arabia pull out of the deal that was brokered by the United States with Israel? If this Chinese brokered deal is so lame, according to foreign policy experts. Okay. So get rid of that screen. So I hope that people, really get it. Like, I really hope that people are starting to understand that the reason the northern um, Gazans need to move to southern Gaza is strictly for a business expansion operation. They need all of those cities that line the Mediterranean coast in Israel. They need to transform them into port cities. Israel, like I mentioned before, and I'm not sure that you heard me before because my sound went out. But as I mentioned before, JP told me earlier that, you know, Israel doesn't produce anything of value to the planet. Their only value to the planet, as far as business is concerned, is the fact that they live right on the Mediterranean coast, which means that They can use their land, they can use their port influence to conduct international trade, business relationships. This is kind of big. And China is expanding there, and China's making it worth their while. So I don't know. I think that's what this is about. You guys were like, "Why aren't you talking about Israel?" So I just talked about Israel. Why did they, sell off their port to India? Why are they allowing China to expand in their region? Why why aren't they thinking about, human lives that will be, dislocated as a result of a business venture, as a result of trying to open up a port city, outside of Gaza? Is it going to happen? I'm only speculating. I don't know. Sean, it's interesting you say that China doesn't take no for an answer. They also don't say yes either. China is very like they exercise in soft power. So they don't take over regions. You notice they didn't buy the port of Haifa. India bought it. China, I'm sure, could have easily purchased that port for, $1 billion. It wasn't that much money. But it's more beneficial to them to actually manage it and operate it and control it than to actually own the port itself. India owns the port now. It's more beneficial for them in their, soft power, communitarian business deal techniques, whatever. It's more beneficial to them to never say no and never say yes. They're just like, it's just business. We're just expanding, So I think that's something we have to learn how these business arrangements are made, you know. In this deal where China's, expressing an interest in expanding their operations throughout the Middle East, did anybody ever say, well, what are we going to do with these million individuals that are living in an area that you want to expand to? What are we going to do with them? And China will say, well, that sounds like a difficult problem, but I'm sure you'll figure it out if this business deal interests you. Like that's literally their response to it. That's a soft power technique. That's how you know, that's how you change culture, change societies, change policy, change constitutions. That's how you change everything is through soft power. And this whole business of, bombs and wars and babies and this and that, it's all propaganda to cover up a business deal. And, and also I believe that the whole message of, everybody putting, is Israel flags in their windows and um, all of your civic buildings changing to blue and white and all of your memes and everything, we stand with Israel, blah, blah, blah. All of that is propaganda as cover for the fact that the United States, from everything that I can see, has kind of left out of this very lucrative trade deal that you've got going on between, you know, basically the Belt and Road initiatives that are sort of undermining the Abraham Accords that were established in 2020. And they're just basically placating Biden by saying, yeah, sure. You want to start this new project of, expanding trade deals in the Middle East and it'll go on into Europe and blah, blah, blah. I feel like they're just kind of, you know, letting him kind of spin out, and he's like, I want to be a part of the deal too, but they're already they're being very business business focused. They've already upgraded the port, so the port was not in great condition. The port in Haifa, Israel, that India now owns, it was not in great condition. So the Chinese company went in and fixed it up. And then they implemented all of their technology to make it run like it's very streamlined now. And then, they convinced Israel somehow to sell it to India for only $1 billion. Talk about selling off your country for no for nothing, for pennies on the dollar. you know? It's like a fire sale, right? So that's what's really going on is and how let's go ahead and speculate a little further. How much do you want to bet that the Likud party, who's probably being run by the blue and white, and the blue and white party is the more, is the party that promotes globalization, capitalism, neoliberalism, communitarianism. How much you want to bet that the blue and white party has basically, infiltrated Israel's government? We all think it's the Likud party, which is Netanyahu and all that. But I think it's actually run by unelected committee members like we have in the United States, where people who run nonprofits and have marketing degrees and sociology degrees or whatever are actually running the government. And how much do you want to bet they've already made a deal to sell off like that land that those northern Gazans are living in right now? How much do you want to bet that it's already gone? And that's why, there's this really intense effort to get rid of them. Like, you got to get out of there now. It's really dangerous, and you got to do it. And we're going to bomb you to oblivion, and all this because that land has already been sold off to whoever. China, technology companies. Trade deals have already been made probably outside of the knowledge of people who live in Gaza. Talk about people who don't have any rights. You know, That's a million people that are going to be dislocated because China wants to expand trade deals into that area. And Netanyahu is completely, he's rendered impotent in this whole thing. He's just like, okay, whatever you want me to say. Start a war, fine, I'll start a war. You know, I don't know. Like, I'm just speculating here, but how much do you want to bet that that land has already been spoken for in some way or another through these expansive trade deals, right? It's To me, this seems much more viable. It seems much more reasonable. It seems much more logical than, you know, other things that you might be told regarding the conflict in Israel right now. Um, and I don't want to speculate about the attack on October 7th. You need a big you need a big event in order to promote these business deals, especially to act as cover for them. So that October 7th, which it's weird that it's like and I'm going to sound a little conspiracy minded here, but I was seeing a few tweets over the weeks before October 7th that Putin was going to get a gift, a really big gift. It was going to be a bomb of a gift, they said, you know, just by these like random Twitter people. And I thought, that's weird. Well, look what happened on his birthday. So I think that obviously this has been a long time in the making. I believe, I would speculate that that land has already been sold off. And it probably undermined, decades old agreements that, that land was off limits to either Israel or any outside forces. But since when does anybody ever, follow the rules or policy of any of these deals that are met, any of these land deals? It's a land grab. And China is kind of there and kind of not, which is kind of interesting. They always take this really subtle approach to things where they're like, no, we're not involved, and they never give the yes or no answer. It's always something really ambivalent, and they're just in it for the business, in it to expand their operations and their business. That's it. So I hope that that's given you guys some clarity. Um, and I want to say that, to his benefit, back in 2019, Trump's maybe saw the writing on the wall. He tried very, he tried as hard as he could to get people to really see what was going on with the Chinese expansion in the Middle East. Um, and he said, and this is something that I posted on my blog post in December of 2020. The first thing he said about this is, let's see, is this. So back in December of 2019, Trump called for the World Bank to stop loaning to China. Um, you know, and he said, why is the World Bank giving money to China? What the heck? So Donald Trump called on Friday. This is again back in 2019 in December, called for the World Bank to stop loaning money to China. One day after the institution adopted a lending plan to Beijing over Washington's objectives. So the World Bank is helping China to expand. In fact, if you look at this article, this is what's really interesting. The World Bank on Thursday adopted a plan to aid China um, with $1 billion up to $1.5 billion in low interest loans. Well, the port of Haifa, now this is probably just a coincidence, but the port of Haifa was purchased for $1.5 billion by India. So, did that World Bank money that was lent to China, which China could then turn around and use that money to extend loans to its business interests, did India take the take the loan from China to buy the port of Haifa? Like this is what I'm talking about is you have to it becomes like wait a minute. So it always comes back to China in my opinion. I hate to be like that. China, 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 but and I don't really care either way. I mean, it's just business. I mean, that's part of the world we live in, right? It's literally just business arrangements, global business arrangements. This is what globalization is. This is what globalization gets you. The World Bank lends money to China. Now, what is China going to do with that money? Are they going to hoard it? Are they going to invest it? No. Well, kind of invest it. They're going to turn it into loans. They're like, great, we got a pot of money. It's $1 billion. We can then go to our allies through Belt and Road and through BRICS, and we can say, hey, you need a loan? We just got some money from the World Bank. So they're going to take that money from the World Bank, lend it out to other countries, probably charge interest on those countries, and boom, then those countries are now in service to China, like say India. you know but they're going to disguise it by purchasing that port in Haifa, Israel, under rupees, maybe, or some other currency, undermining the dollar. So Trump was good to come out back in 2019 and say, whoa, whoa, whoa. Ultimately, what this does is it undermines the dollar. Why is the World Bank giving money to China, who is then taking that money and making it their own loans for their own um, interests, their own business interests, with their own partners, their own partnerships they have with other countries? This is business, guys. This whole thing that you're seeing about Israel and Palestine and everything going on today, it's just business. That's it. Um, I don't think there's really any other way to 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 explain it. So Sean says, China is the brain taking over the world with Pinky in the brain. Probably. Yeah. Um, so if you go back to this article that I wrote in December of 2020, it starts the question. And the question was, why did our alleged ally start a business arrangement with our alleged existential enemy? And the only other person that asked that question was Trump. It was me and Trump. That's it. An anarchist and a businessman. Why did our existential ally, our alleged ally, Israel, who we give all this money to, why did they allow for our existential enemy to start operating and managing and clearing out a port that we had used, that the United States had used for decades, where we were docking one of our biggest Navy fleets for years? And we had this arrangement with Israel for years. And all of a sudden, that arrangement was undermined because this Chinese tech company came in and started managing it. Now, from what I understand, again, this article was written almost 3 years ago, or this blog piece that I wrote was written almost 3 years ago. But from what I understand, that sixth Navy fleet is probably still there, but probably not doing much, just sitting there. So I want you to take one more look at the map. Now, after everything that I've explained twice, because apparently my audio just kicked off, so now you can hear me. You've got Haifa up here. You can see it, right? You can see where Haifa, Israel is, right up here, that little bump. Okay, Haifa, Israel is a port city, and the port, one of the biggest ports for the Mediterranean Sea, is now owned by India and managed by a Chinese tech company who has openly said and openly stated, we would like to expand, 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 and run our operations all along the coast. Oh, but wait, what's this? That's Gaza. Gaza is in the way. So, maybe all of those companies and organizations and business interests in Israel um, went to China and said, we don't mind you expanding, but we have this little problem here. It's called the Gaza Strip. And China said, whatever, do what you have to do. Figure out a way to make it so that those individuals are removed from that area. It doesn't have to be the whole area, just the one closest to Israel, just the northern part, so that we can continue our expansion project. And I'm not saying it's just China that said this to Israel. It's the United States, probably. It's India. It's pressure from the entire Mediterranean region pressuring, you know, Israel to move those million people out of Gaza so that they can expand their port projects. All right? That's what's going on. I really do believe that that's what's going on, and I hope that you guys are kind of with me on that, and you can kind of say, okay, yeah, this makes sense. It's business. We're not doing war anymore. We're not expanding democracy. We're expanding business arrangements. We're brokering deals. We're trying to set up, trade relations and things like that. Um, so I imagine that that's what's going on. Again, I know I've said it a million times in this broadcast, but I want to just tell you again. Haifa, Israel, this little bump up here, is a port city that is owned now. The port is owned by India, not Israel, and it's managed by China. They're and it's very successful. It's totally technology run. It's only got 100 employees. It's very streamlined. They can get vessels, dozens of vessels in and out of the port every minute, so that around 1 million vessels a year can go in and out of this port. And that's a lot of vessels to go out of one little port. They need to expand all the way down here, right? All right, let's see. Right. So Pasia Love, thank you for your comment. Just like they did with Maui and Lahaina, exactly, you know, and it's always about power and money. Um, exactly, you know, it's always about a business arrangement. So now that you have this little kernel of information, which gives you a different perspective, when you hear the stories about babies and you hear the stories about bombings and you hear the all of these things that really cause you to have an emotional reaction, can you cut cut through your emotions and say, wait, what's the business arrangement with this land grab going on? And it started in Haifa, Israel, and there was only one person that was trying to keep it from happening, and that was your man Trump, you know? So, it's very concerning that, China and various other, interests might have control over such a huge region that goes into Europe, but that's what they want. That's what they want, and it's hard to push back against, these kind of business arrangements and this kind of expansion when they're not the ones dropping bombs. They're using soft power, you know? So it's kind of hard to speak out against it when they haven't really done anything to. I guess they've instigated it by saying, "We want to expand, so you better do something, and we'll just wait and see what happens," you know? So it becomes very difficult to process this information when we live in a place of, sort of like emotional outrage all the time, where we're constantly outraged by, what we're seeing on our social media feeds or even on the news, you know. So this went on a little bit longer than I wanted it to, and that's simply because my audio went out, and so I ended up repeating uh, much of the broadcast in this last half. So I appreciate for those of you who couldn't hear me for a while, you stuck with it, and so now I'm back. And we have been throttled lately a lot. Even our own computer isn't working as well as it was before. Not sure what's going on there. But, luckily we have a lot of things to occupy our time right now. So we're moving. So, but I did want to come on here and say this. I think that when I read that the deal for the purchase of Haifa, of the port at Haifa, had actually gone through and that, it was now owned by India, I was like, okay, so it's a fire sale. You know, Israel is selling off their only useful thing, which is all of this port, um, all of these locations for operations for trade, trade operations and port cities and things like that. They don't really have anything else of value that they bring to the world stage, right? To at least as far as business is concerned. Um, so, and the United States wants in on the deal somehow. Not sure why. I feel like we could probably stand on our own, but that's a totally different commentary. Um, you know. So anyway, I want to thank you for joining and sticking with me this far. And talk amongst yourselves. Once I leave this broadcast, and maybe mention to some of your connections on social media that are getting a little bit too keyed up about this thing, and say, well, did you ever think about the fact that China's been wanting to expand into the Middle East, and in fact they have expanded in the Middle East, and that maybe that land in Gaza is already gone? Maybe it's already been sold off. So it's something to think about. It's a speculation. Um, and I don't claim to be right about any of it, but if I was in the business of wanting to control the Mediterranean Sea and various waterways and expand my power, my prowess, my business acumen, then that's what I would do, is I would buy the land right out from under someone, you know, if I was that kind of person. I'm not, and I never will be, but that's what I'm saying. If I was that kind of person, that's how I would operate, you know? So think about it, guys. All right. Thank you so much for joining. Have a great afternoon and have a great rest of your week. I'm going to end this stream now. Thanks again. Bye bye.